Adam, you are muted.
Hi, this is Adam Zimkowski. We are here for the online watch party to tax Amazon and big business. In just a few minutes, we are going to be hearing from Councilmember Shama Sawant, who, as people likely know, is the primary sponsor of the bill, together with Councilmember Tammy Morales. Councilmember Sawant, in just a few minutes, will talk about the basics of the tax Amazon legislation, some of the specifics about the $200 million it would raise for direct coronavirus relief payments for 100,000 households this year, and then about the $500 million it would raise every year thereafter for permanently affordable housing, high quality, union built, and also for Green New Deal programs to massively reduce Seattle's carbon emissions. Shama's also going to talk about what to expect at today's committee meeting, which is the first, as many know, to hear the Amazon tax legislation. What are the key points we want to make to raise to most effectively pressure council members? And so Shama is going to address some of those questions, and then Jonathan Rosenblum, a staff person in our office, is going to further go into that. But in reality, we're raising these points also to begin to talk with our neighbors, friends, family, to combat the lies that we've heard over in just the last little over a week. We've seen 4 hit pieces run by the Seattle Times. So this pre-watch party is also to hone those arguments, to be able to win people over and combat those lies. Before we continue, before I kick it over to Councilmember Sawant, we want to give you, I'm gonna have Ted Verdone in our office speak very briefly about how to sign up for public comment and how to get to the city council meeting at 10 a.m. It's really important that people sign up as soon as possible right now in reality. So Ted, why don't you go ahead and explain to people how they can do that?
Thank you, Adam. And hopefully right now people can see my computer screen. And I'm just going to walk through how to sign up for public comment, what it'll look like, so that there are no technical difficulties on your end. So the first thing that you do is you go to this website, seattle.gov/council/committees/public comment. And that a link to that website will be posted in YouTube and Twitch and Facebook and however you're watching this. So feel free to just click on that link and you can go along with me as I go, or you can do this afterwards. That will bring you to the public comment sign-up sheet. So you scroll down to get to it, and you're just going to fill it in with your information. You put in your name. You put in your email address. This has to be accurate because you're going to get sent the phone number to call in for public comment here. So I'm going to put in my seattle.gov, and then you put in your phone number. This also has to be accurate because they will, this is how you will be unmuted when it's your turn to speak. They'll look up this phone number. Just going to put the phone number for the Councilmember Sawant office. But this should be whatever number you're actually going to call in for. Check this meeting and then what you're speaking to. So you can say tax Amazon, or you can say affordable housing, or you can say whatever you want to say. I am going to say, this is only a test. Don't call on me. But you should obviously put this actual subject you're going to be speaking to. So you fill that out. Now, we've heard reports from people who have told us that they have had to fill out this form more than once before it worked. So it seems to have worked, but now I'm going to come over to my email and make sure that it's worked. So yeah, I've got a new email from Council Public Comment, and in that email, I scroll to the bottom. It's got all the information that I signed up with, and then at the bottom, it's got a phone number, an ID, and a password. So I'm going to need that information to call in. About 10 or 5 or even 5 minutes before the meeting starts at 10 o'clock, I'm going to call that number. I'm going to make sure I'm connected successfully, and I'm going to remain on hold until it's my turn to speak in public comment. And that should be all that you need to do to sign up for public comment.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ted. Yeah, so soon in a few minutes, we'll hear from Councilmember Sawan about the basics of the legislation. And then we'll go to Jonathan after that to kind of hone in on some of those key points that we want to make before then again kicking it back to Ted to tell us how to get to that meeting. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming this morning. We're also going to try to have a question and answer portion so that while Jonathan's going through the talking points and also while Shama is going through the key points of the legislation, if you have questions on either of the platforms, we're live streaming on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitch. Please note those down. Sasha Somer, or I'm sorry, Nick Jones, a staff person in our office, will be compiling those, and we'll hope to get to them during this. And again, so thank you so much. This is not an easy time, obviously, and it's a difficult way to engage with the city council, but it's absolutely critical. And we have seen that these online pre-watch parties and then attending to give public testimony can have a huge impact. And ultimately, we know that big business is going to bring a tremendous amount of pressure to bear on the city council, and that it's our movement that is going to combat that. And ultimately, it's the pressure that we're able to bring to advocate for an Amazon tax that is going to be decisive. In 1 minute, we'll hear from Shama, but it's important to remember that we are a big movement here. We started off with a 500 strong Amazon tax kickoff on a snow day. We've had hundreds of people organizing at action conferences. We've got unions, organizations in large numbers. Most recently, we've had 6,000 people sign a petition calling for this Amazon tax for coronavirus relief. And that includes hundreds in every single district. In just the last several days, more than 2,000 people have emailed the council. Hundreds of you have left powerful comments, and we're so excited to hear many of them today during the public comment portion, and make sure that council members hear them directly as well. So without further ado, let's hear from Councilmember Sawan about the specifics of the legislation and what to expect at today's committee meeting. So let's go over to you, Shama.
Thanks, Adam. I just wanted to briefly talk about what the legislation does, because I feel like we've covered it quite a bit, and maybe others can come in on that. I just wanted to give also an overview of, as you said, what to expect and some of the main points that we're hearing in opposition to the tax Amazon legislation. And as Adam has already said, this is a common sense. If you look at it just in terms of the facts on the ground, this is a common sense legislation. Our economy and society is in massive crisis. It was in crisis before the coronavirus pandemic started. We already had an emergency on housing affordability. Seattle, it ranks, unfortunately, one of the highest in cities in the United States for the escalation in the homelessness crisis. And then, on top of that, we now have the pandemic. So in other words, working people and the most vulnerable, which is the vast majority of the population of the city, is now facing a triple emergency. It's the threat to public health and the potential loss of life if the government prematurely ends social distancing. So that's what we're facing from the pandemic. But that's now combined with the pre-existing housing affordability emergency, which is now going to be exacerbated, and now a new crisis, because as we head into a recession with an economy that has come for all practical purposes to a standstill, a massive jobs crisis with numbers of unemployment going up into at an alarming rate every single day. We've all seen the numbers. Many of those who are listening in right now are among those who either have been laid off and so have lost all income, or people who have been told to stay at home, but they don't have paid leave. So if you look at all the facts on the ground, it is obvious that, and if there was no politics, there was no political pressures from any end involved, and if we were all, if all our voices, whether you're a big corporation or a billionaire or an ordinary person, if all our voices counted for the same in politics, then we wouldn't, be debating this legislation at all, because it completely makes sense. Our society is in crisis. Tens of thousands of working families are in crisis. Small businesses have been wiped out. Who has the money? The cash is at the top. It's the very wealthy people, the most the billionaire class, the millionaire class, those who have exploited workers, uh, and who have paid the least amount of tax in the last many decades in a city and a state which has the most regressive tax system in the entire nation. And so uh, we are um, we are but that's not the world we have, which is we don't have a world where all our voices count for the same. There's just a debate in the city council about the facts, and then once we look at all the facts, we do the right thing. That is not how it works, and that is why it's only me on this phone call right now, and it's only two council members, myself and Councilmember Morales, who have sponsored this legislation. And that is why we should expect a massive fight back, which is that big business, the wealthy, the corporate landlords, all the the executives and the shareholders, they have massive amounts of money, but that also translates into political power and clout, which means that they own most of the politicians. Even the politicians who maintain a progressive veneer are subject to the pressures from the big business entities. We saw this in 2018 when the vast majority of the Democratic establishment ended up repealing the tax that we had fought for so hard, and we had won a unanimous vote, and then it was sent down the drain by these council members, and only two council members at that time voted against the repeal. It was myself and Councilmember Mosqueda. So we should recognize that. So today, what are we facing? What are the political conditions we're facing? Right now, as Adam said, there's enormous pressure from big business and the wealthy, and on um, on the city council. And as Adam mentioned, there's no fewer than 4 editorials in the Seattle Times, which is a conservative newspaper. And the latest editorial is from Alex Peterson, who is a newly elected city council member. And this is an absolutely fierce opposition to the Amazon tax. It would be a mistake, though, on the other hand, not to recognize that for those politicians who want to build their future career on the idea of being a progressive elected official, that is not going to be straightforward for them to vote against this tax. So what we should expect from them is that they will try to water it down or use some other kind of excuse to try and vote no. We don't know exactly what is going to happen. We don't have a crystal ball. However, what we need to do today is present our public testimony, and I hope everybody signed up. Thanks to Ted for giving us clear instructions on how to do it. But our obligation today, whether you're socialists or Democratic Party supporters, activists, those of you who agree with us that we need progressive revenues and that the big business should be taxed, we have an obligation today to both be strategic and unrelenting in our public testimony, meaning that we should not let the council off the hook, but also we should understand that some of the council members are under pressure and not make it easy for those council members who want to come across as progressive. We should not make it easy for them to reject our public testimony by letting them say that, oh, you're just being unbalanced, or you're being too critical. you're just rejecting all of us. We are not all on the same page. We're still open to this legislation and so on and so forth. So I think our public testimony should reflect the fact that we are going to hold the city council accountable, and at the same time they have every room right now to do the right thing. Nobody's stopping them from doing the right thing. We welcome them to do the right thing, and they should be doing the right thing given that our society is in such deep crisis. And before starting a few more detailed points about the public comment, I just wanted to say that we have the second committee meeting on April 29th, and then the next committee meeting after that on May 13th. But between the 29th and the 13th, we have May 1st, which is International Workers' Day. We need to make the most of this. This will be a national day of actions. And please look out for notifications from my office, from Socialist Alternative, from other organizations for details on our May 1st actions. And of course, everything we do will be done through social distancing. So don't let anybody tell you otherwise, that we are going to be violating the recommendations from public health scientists. We're going to be doing the right thing. But as Adam said, social distancing or not, we have to build our movement. And in fact, we have to build our movement even stronger right now because of the crisis that we are in, while the millionaires, the multimillionaires, and the billionaires are still, even during this pandemic, they are having a comfortable existence and they have massive cash reserves. So we have to push the city council to do the right thing. In terms of public comment, I would urge everybody to, of course, clearly state your name. Say if you're a renter, and if you are, living in the city, then you should mention which district you're in and mention which council member is supposedly presiding over that district. So for example, if you live in District 1, then you should say, I live in District 1, and that's Council Member Herbol's district, because mentioning the name of the council member puts pressure on them, and they're not going to like it. And I also want to say, you may hear the council president saying you shouldn't say the council member's name, but you should ignore that. It's your right. It's public testimony. It's your First Amendment right. You should not obviously be your public testimony should be completely free of profanities, and it should stick to facts. But you have every right to hold your elected official accountable, because it is through your votes and support that they got elected. So they have an obligation to be loyal to the interests of working people. And also in your public testimony, you should also mention, if possible, the kind of work you do. Like, for example, if you are a healthcare worker and you're working right now as a frontline worker, you should say that, I work as a grocery worker or as a healthcare worker. Or if you've been laid off, or you haven't been laid off, but you're at home with lost wages or even partially lost wages because of the pandemic, you should mention that. If you're a member of a union, you should absolutely mention that, because there are council members who say that they support unions, but then it's not good enough for them to say that they support unions. They have to stand with union workers, because union workers are also, in addition to non-unionized workers, suffering massively in this crisis, because even though some of them may not have lost their jobs, they are at home without pay. How are they supposed to make sure that their family survives? Especially children and elderly family members are going to be be extremely vulnerable. And please identify, if you've been part of the Tax Amazon movement, please definitely identify that you've been in the Tax Amazon discussions, because we want to make sure the council members understand that this is a movement that comprises not just hundreds, but thousands of people. It's not like it's some sort of narrow group. Also mention the context of the pandemic. It's a triple emergency of public health and virus, housing crisis, and unemployment. And what would the Amazon tax fund? This year, it would fund $200 million worth of cash assistance for up to 100,000 most vulnerable households. The households that have lost money, they can get up to $500 every month for 4 months. That's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough, but it will be a very, very significantly important lifeline for households that have zero income. And we should mention that there is federal stimulus checks, but those checks are going to be short-lived. And this crisis is going to stretch for God knows how long. And then starting next year, the tax would raise $500 million, which is the bare minimum that needs to be raised to fund the construction of social housing and to fulfill some of the Green New Deal requirements for our city, so that we can also begin to address the climate catastrophe that is looming on top of us, aside from the pandemic that we're facing right now. A very, very important point that everybody should mention is that this Amazon tax legislation, if the council passes it, will create jobs. It will create jobs, 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 thousands of jobs, thousands of good paying public sector union jobs. This was always going to be important because we need good jobs for our community members so that they are able to survive. But imagine how much more significant this becomes in the face of a massive unemployment crisis. So we have to make sure that we emphasize that. Who would pay this tax? Not working people who are already overburdened in our city because we have the most regressive tax system in the nation. Not small businesses who not only are overburdened with tax, but now many of them are I have either been wiped out or are barely holding on in this pandemic. Not medium-sized businesses, not nonprofits, not grocery stores, not public employers. In fact, only the largest 2% of corporations will pay this tax. So these are the most profitable corporations, the largest corporations with the most comfortable cash reserves at any time, even now during this pandemic. And these corporations are owned by the richest people in our city. And so the tax is so, for example, if Amazon is one of the corporations that is going to pay this tax, it's not the Amazon workers who are going to pay this tax. So it's a lie if any council member tells you, well, what about the tech workers? No, the Amazon tech workers are not going to pay this tax. The Amazon custodial workers, the security workers, the delivery drivers, the cargo handlers, the warehouse workers, they are not going to be paying this tax. This tax is going to come out of the very, very deep pockets of the billionaire class that owns the Amazon corporation. So when we say it's a corporate payroll tax, it's a tax on those who own the corporations, not on the workers. We have to be crystal clear about this because the big business representatives and their representatives on the council will repeatedly say this lie. So we have to repeatedly counter this lie. The other thing that should be noted is that it's just 800 businesses that will be, roughly 800 businesses that will be paying this tax. The vast majority of businesses, 98% of businesses, will not be paying this tax. So it is not in any way some sort of crushing burden on businesses. Absolutely not. And the tax rate is very, very modest. In fact, modest is not even the word for it. It is a 1.3% tax on corporate payroll. And I want to come back to this point because actually it comes out to less than 1% tax for most businesses. And I want to come back to that. But just in terms of understanding the political makeup of the council, uh, please remember that this legislation has been co-sponsored by my office and by Councilmember Morales' office. So it will be really important to thank both council members so that everybody knows that this is a movement that is supported by not just one council member, not just by the socialists in the council, but also by Councilmember Morales, who is the council member for District 2, where many people of color live, where there's a lot of low income population which needs this tax. So it's really important that she's supporting this tax, and we should make sure that's mentioned. We also have to make sure to distinguish between someone like Councilmember Mosqueda and the rest of the establishment. Because remember, Councilmember Mosqueda stood with me in 2018 and voted against the repeal of the Amazon tax. So I think as members of the public, it's important we remind her that we appreciated that she stood with the movement in 2018 and that we hope that she will do the right thing again this time. It's her committee. She's chairing the committee. She has a major obligation to stand with the community, and we should let her know that while we appreciate what she did in 2018 and we hope she will do the right thing again. Another thing about Councilmember Mosqueda is that she comes from the union movement like I do, and union members need this tax. So we hope that all the council members like herself, like me, who say they represent union workers, they vote for this tax. And also it's important that they not water this tax down because union members need this bare minimum tax. It is not a lavish tax by any means. And just to let everybody know, Councilmember Mosqueda also spoke really strongly on the need for housing just on Monday, like 2 days ago. She said housing is a necessity for responding to this public health crisis. We knew we were in an affordable housing crisis before this. The fact that we have COVID looming over our community means that it's essential that we construct and move forward with affordable housing wherever possible and keeping our workers healthy. Well, there you go. That's basically the definition of what this tax is going to do. So we should urge her to stand with the movement, not water it down, and really join the movement in putting pressure on the other 6 council members. If she joins Council Member Morales and me in standing strong for this tax to build up to 8,000 affordable social homes, creating good paying union jobs with priority hire and community workforce agreement, well, that's the definition of standing with a union. I think on the flip side, the movement has to call out the council members who shamefully repealed the tax in 2018. That's Gonzalez, Herbold, and Juarez. And I think we should tell them that while it was terrible what they did in 2018, they now have a historic opportunity. They get a chance which most of us don't get in life, which is to make up for our past mistakes. So now they have the Amazon tax in front of them again. They can make up for their mistake in repealing the tax and stand with the movement this time and get on the right side of history by voting for it in full without watering it down. And so the question for them is, will they stand with working people this time? Council Member Lewis is another important council member to mention in the public comment, because he would not have won his election without the strong support of hotel workers and the Hotel Workers Union Unite Here Local 8. Well, hotel workers are badly needing this tax because while many of them may not have been technically laid off, over 90% of them are at home without pay. Their healthcare is being threatened by the hotels that can pay their healthcare, but they're being, they're being told we're in this together. But in reality, the hotel owners want to keep all their cash with them and not give the hotel workers the bare minimum, which is at least their healthcare. So if Councilmember Lewis wants to stand with the very people who got him elected, thanks to whom he has the council seat, then he has to stand with the hotel workers and vote yes on this bill and not water it down. Uh, Finally, Councilmember Peterson wrote a shameful op-ed in the Seattle Times yesterday. I hope everyone has a chance to look at it, either before or after committee. But it's very clear where he stands. It's not like he's pretending to be progressive. So we need to call him out on the shameful opinion editorial. He said, it's clear which side he's on. And in effect, by refusing to tax big business, what he's saying is working people will be taxed to pay for this crisis, because effectively that's what's going to happen, because that's the status quo. The status quo is working people paying for this tax. On top of that, we are facing up to $300 million in budget cuts. You're going to hear this in the committee. How will you fill the hole that has been created by the budget cuts? And remember, the budget cuts themselves have been are a result of a regressive taxation. If you rely on working people for taxes and don't have the courage to tax big business, when working people lose their jobs, what happens? They can't pay their taxes. And there you go. You have a budget crisis in the city. So if we want to address this budget crisis, let alone fund additional needs like affordable housing, then you need to tax big business. That is the only way to do it. I mean, let's just be crystal clear. Mathematically speaking, the only way to address this crisis is to tax big business. There is no other way. There is no other magic solution. There's no other, you'll often hear council members say, let's get creative. Well, this is the only thing that you can do. So let's get some courage on the council and not pretensions to creativity and actually pass this tax. Are they going to show the courage in the face of an unprecedented crisis in our society? Just a few other points I wanted to make on the tax rate. It's a tax rate of 1.3%. The companies that will pay this tax, so it's just the top 2%, they will pay a 1.3% on their corporate payroll, meaning the tax applies only to the payroll portion of the budget. So if you're spending something like 60% of your budget as a company on payroll, then your net tax rate is not 1.3%, it's 0.6 times 1.3, which is 0.78%. In other words, what are we talking about? Effectively, for most corporations, the tax rate is less than 1%. Compare that to a household that is making $25,000 in the city and pays a staggering 17% of its income in tax. Just compare less than 1% to 17%. What in the world are we talking about? Why are these businesses crying foul when it is barely going to make a dent in their massive cash reserves? And so, in fact, what we should say is that the wealthy who have been profiting off workers' labor, they should feel lucky that we are levying such a low tax rate on them. In fact, it should be much higher than this. And so when they cry foul, it's completely dishonest. You know what else is dishonest? Is when the wealthy say we are all in this together. Well, if we're all in this together, then why are you fighting tooth and nail against paying less than 1% of a tax so the rest of us can just barely survive and maybe have some housing in the bargain? So we are not all in this together. You're being dishonest as big business, and that's why it's a fight. That's why we need to build a movement. And as I said, the tax will create thousands of jobs. And this is one point I want to end on. You know, when big business says this is not a good time to, I mean, first of all, just keep in mind, for years, every year they say this is not a good time to tax. So it's never a good time. If you took their word for it, it's never a good time. But let's look at specifically their argument that it's not a good time during the pandemic. You know, we have a recession. It's not a good time to tax big business. Well, don't take my word for it. Yes, I'm an economist, but don't take my word for it because I'm a socialist also. Let's take the word of economists who are not socialists. Let's look at all the mainstream economists, you know, who are saying in magazines like Foreign Policy, which are not a bastion of socialist thinking. These are completely pro-corporate dominated publications in which prominent economists like Danny Roderick, like Joseph Stiglitz, they are saying right now the only way to solve this crisis is, one, to give immediate cash assistance to working people who have lost incomes, because they will go and spend in the economy. This is classic Keynesianism. You know, I don't think we can stop at Keynesianism, but as a matter of fact, this is what this is Keynesianism 101. The only way the economy came out of the Great Depression, you know, decades ago, was through this kind of project where working people were given jobs, they were given incomes, and they went out and spent in the community. So completely reject, our public testimony should completely reject this falsehood, this lie that a recession is not a time to tax big business. The recession is precisely the time to tax big business, because that is the only way you can create income, revenues in the economy through which you can give cash to working families who will go and spend in the local neighborhoods. They will actually revive small businesses in the neighborhoods in our city. And then on top of that, if you create jobs, then those jobs will actually revive the economy while building something productive. So in other words, taxing big business to build social housing will create jobs, and it will create something good for our economy, which is affordable social housing that is rent controlled. And all the sensible economists right now are saying we need to do this, otherwise we will not come out of the recession. So if they want to come out of the recession, they need to do this. I'll stop there.
Great, thank you very much, Shama. This is Jonathan Rosenblum. I'm going to pick up the agenda from here. We have a few minutes left before we're all going to switch over and listen to the council meeting. I want to make sure that people know that you're in good company if you're listening and watching. We had at last count 193 people on various channels as part of this meeting. I also want to remind people that if you have a question, please put it in the chat and council staff will put it up on a screen for the rest of us, and we will try to answer your questions as best as possible. I want to move to, we have a brief presentation here on public testimony, and Ted, if you could put that first slide up. Some of this material has already been reviewed by Councilmember Sawant, but you can see people will be limited to 1 minute for public testimony, and oftentimes it's 2 minutes, but this time, because so many people signed up for speaking, you'll have 1 minute for public testimony. Just be yourself, be natural when it's your turn to speak. Speak at a normal pace. Don't try to rush your words, because oftentimes if you try to fit in too many words in your 1 minute, then they won't really be heard or understood as well. So speak at a normal pace. And most of all, tell your story. You've got an experience, you've got a perspective. That's what the council members need to hear. Let's go to the next slide. You introduce yourself, as Shama said, where you live and your council district if you know it. Absolutely very important for holding them accountable. where you work, and if you've lost work, where you used to work, right? And how you lost your job if it was a result of COVID. Also, please note if you're a member of a union or community organization so that the council members understand where you're coming from. Next slide. Basic points, Shama has already reviewed these. It's important to note this is a triple emergency. There's the public health emergency, the ongoing housing emergency, and now the jobs and income emergency. And as Shama has also noted, big business can afford to pay this very modest tax, which again is going to be less than 1% of their budgets, less than 1% of their budgets to fund this urgently needed assistance, long-term funding for social housing and the Green New Deal. Let's go to the next slide. The tax would cover the top 2% of businesses. In other words, 98% of all businesses in Seattle would be exempt. They would pay nothing. The only businesses paying are the top 2% of businesses. And I'm going to preview some of those businesses for you in just a couple of minutes. Again, the tax would pay for immediate cash assistance for up to 100,000 vulnerable households, $500 checks once a month for 4 months. It would fund, beginning in 2021, a massive expansion of 10,000 affordable, publicly controlled social homes in the next 10 years, 10,000 new homes with rent control. Thirdly, it would provide funding to upgrade tens of thousands of existing homes to meet Green New Deal standards, electrification, insulation and weatherization, and so on, making homes, existing homes more efficient so people can afford to stay in them longer. And then fourthly, as Shama has noted, that this investment will create and support potentially thousands of good union jobs. Let's go to the next slide. We have a very handy infographic, and I'm sorry if we can't just sort of hand it out to all 193 of you right here through our screens. But if you go to Shama's web page, you can see and even download this infographic. What you do is you go to seattle.gov/council/Sawant, and then you go down on the left-hand side, you'll see a button that says Tax Amazon. Go up. There you go. You click on that. And you go down to the middle of the page, and there is the infographic, and you can pull it up on your screen and download it and even print it. It's a very handy guide for some of the basics of the legislation. Let's go back to the slides. Are you able to do that, Ted? So with the next slide, if you could see it, it would say the most important thing in your 1 minute is to tell your story in your own words. Let's go to the next one, Ted. In your own words, why do we need to tax big business to fund COVID relief, social housing, and the Green New Deal? In particular, if there's something you can briefly say about what's happened to you and your family as a result of the housing crisis, as a result of the COVID crisis, whatever. Do you have a personal experience to share? And explain and reinforce why council members need to stand with working people, not with the interests of big business. We have a couple of comments that I want to just read from some of you who are participating. Somebody on Twitch said, Amazon is making an insane amount of money right now. I was working at their warehouse in DuPont, and the only reason we couldn't ship faster was the lack of trucks able to ship items. Orders were coming in faster than ever. We have Razzie, who writes in from District 5, which is Deborah Juarez's district. Razzie writes, I'm a disabled business owner working from home. We need stimulus money now. So many of us are facing possible homelessness. And what I would say, Razzie, if you're signed up to speak, please, as Shama mentioned, emphasize that Juarez did a shameful thing 2 years ago by voting to repeal the modest tax on big business. It's her opportunity now, a historic opportunity to make amends, do the right thing, and vote yes on this tax Amazon legislation. I would like, if we can, Ted, to go to the next set of slides on who our opponents are, because obviously we're fighting Amazon, but it's also important to think about and to understand who else is from big business is weighing in against us. These are opponents I've listed, just a small sampling of some of the big businesses who in the last week have written to council members and to the mayor saying, you must reject this tax. Nucor Steel, which operates the steel mill in West Seattle, is in fact not a small mom and pop operation. It's the largest steel manufacturer in the United States with $2.4 billion in profits in 2018. They paid their CEO last year $19 million. And their letter to us this past week said, well, now is not a good time because things are fragile and we can't tax business. There's a company called CBRE, and maybe you don't know about it. You might have seen the signs if you look at buildings downtown that are being sold. It is the largest global commercial real estate services and investment company with $24 billion of worldwide revenues. They have also written in to say, you cannot tax big business now. This would kill jobs. We have downtown law firms like Stokes Lawrence and Lane Powell. And if these names are not familiar to you, you should know that Lane Powell was one of the law firms that led the fight against our high earners tax that we passed, that the council passed in 2017. And oftentimes these law firms are representing employers against workers and against unions in litigation. We have the big construction company, Lease Crutcher Lewis, $1 billion in revenues in 2019. They're responsible for construction, Key Arena, the convention center expansion, Rainier Square, and so on. They're crying foul too, saying that they can't afford to pay this tax. The owner of the Space Needle says this is a terrible time to tax big business, as have the Seattle Mariners executives, whose majority owner is worth $1.1 billion. Let's go to the next slide. Here are some of the things that they've said. The Seattle Mariners vice president said that this tax is incredibly reckless, dangerous, and irresponsible. The Seattle Times editorial board has called our tax spiteful, and it's going to kill jobs. And Howard Wright, as I've noted, the Space Needle owner, said that this crisis goes well beyond Seattle's borders, and it should not be addressed by the city alone. And that's one thing we're going to hear from big business, that because this is an international crisis, the city should in fact do nothing, which is a shameful position to take. Next slide. And then we got this really lovely letter from the Seattle Weston, where they wrote that the council members who are supporting it are selfish, heartless, and ignorant, and making political moves during this global emergency. This is an outrage. How dare you? Again, this is a company that does not want to pay 1% of their budget to help fund COVID relief, social housing, and the Green New Deal. So I know we are going to transition to the council meeting very briefly. There's more that we will share with you in the coming days and weeks on what our opponents are saying, and perhaps we'll be able to put this stuff up on our blog, our website, so that you'll have easier access to it. But we wanted to share a flavor for you this morning of what we are facing when we go before council and when we're going out in the public fighting the richest of the rich corporations to get this Amazon tax passed. I'm going to turn it over now to Adam, who's going to sum up, I believe, and bring us home.
All right. All right, thank you so much, Jonathan. And right now, I'm sure a lot of the people watching this morning have been part of our rallies or have helped pack City Hall. And I think right now we would likely be having a chant about when we fight, we win. And if we were doing that, it's hard to feel it right now because we're sitting at our homes. But there's 193 of us actually watching along on the 3 platforms. So we have, in fact, packed City Hall today. We've packed chambers. we've added yet another demonstration of how forcefully the community needs this Amazon tax for coronavirus relief and also for social housing and Green New Deal programs. As others have already indicated, please put on your calendar next week, April 29th, there will be the next committee meeting. And then May 13th is when the Amazon tax is set to be voted on. So next week, April 29th and May 13th, please put on your calendar. I also want to spend 30 seconds talking about another activity that's going on this Saturday at 2 p.m. We have a rent strike organizing conference. Many of you know that renters are really suffering, the working people who can't pay rent. Millions are grappling with this question. How do we turn an individual act of somebody who cannot pay rent into a collective, powerful action by renters? We want to talk about, discuss, and organize a movement to demand the suspension of rent and mortgage payments. So please also put on your calendar next Saturday, April 25th. That's just coming up in a few days at 2 p.m. To talk about rent strike. So now, without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ted. He's going to give you instructions once again on how to sign up for public comment if you already haven't, and please do, even if you don't get a chance to speak. It matters how many people sign up, and also very importantly, how to get to this city council meeting so we can make our voice heard, exercise our pressure on city council. So Ted, take it over.
So I went through this demonstration at the beginning of the meeting and would like to go through it again now for anybody that missed it at the beginning of the meeting. To sign up for public comment, you go to this website, which is also going to be links to it will be posted in the various platforms where you might be watching this watch party right now. So seattle.gov/council/committee/public comment. That brings you to a page that has instructions on how to sign up for public comment. And at the bottom of the page is a form. You fill out the form. You put your name, your email address. You must use the correct email address because the phone number to call in for public comment will be sent to that email address. You put your phone number. Again, it must be a correct phone number because this has to be the phone number that you're going to actually use to call in, because that's how the IT people in the city will recognize that it's it's you when it's your turn to speak. So I'm going to put, for this demonstration, the office line in Councilmember Silent's office, but you should use whatever phone number you're going to call in for. You select this committee and you say what you're going to be speaking to, which is going to be tax Amazon, or it's going to be COVID relief, or however you want to describe it. I will say this is only a test. You click submit. And we have had people, I scrolled back up and I see it says, thank you for signing up. So that means that it probably went well. I come to my email and I get a new email that says, thank you for registering for public comment. And when I scroll to the bottom of that, it has the call-in information. So I call this phone number, and using the prompts, I put in the ID and the password as requested. And that's how I will get in. And it looks like I'm the 57th person signed up for public comment. So there's many people who intend to speak. When you've signed up for public comment, you will then probably want to start watching the meeting on the Seattle channel. So you go to seattlechannel.org/watch live. Or if you want, you can just type in seattlechannel.org and click on watch live. I'll do that just to show you how to do that. But we'll have this link also. Click on watch live. And once the meeting starts, this is how you will watch. So if you've signed up for public comment, please call in now. You don't want to lose your place in line because you had connection problems. So please call in now and get on hold so you're ready to go when the meeting starts, which it'll do shortly. And with that, I think I will just put up the instructions if I can still find them, and we will end the meeting. And everybody should please call in to whatever. Hopefully, you've signed up for public comment, and please call in now.